if you had to give this chapter in your life a name, what would that name be and why?
If I had to give it a name, I'd give it Ascension. Because over this last 2 years, being forced to be in the house, to be by myself, to commit to really spending time with my family, both my partner, my kid, but also my parents, my brothers, my sisters, my grandma, my cousins, like really just finding our way back to each other, being less distracted than what we were before the pandemic. I think all of just the love, the community, the isolation, the anxiety, all of it. I feel like all of it has created such this different hunger to learn more in me. Before I was very, I wouldn't say self-absorbed, but I was very interested in the things, only the things that I was going through.
Okay.
And still, I'm very interested in only the things that I'm going through, but I've included a lot of people to come with me because I've had to. The people around me are dying, so now I'm doing more research. So now I'm learning how to speak to them on the other side. Like I've done a lot of just like unlearning, which has helped me, literally slingshot me higher. When you realize like all of the things that you've learned throughout life aren't really what it is, you just turn into this different person, and you ascend.
What signs, like what had to happen in your life for you to realize, oh, that's a learned behavior that I need to actually unlearn and switch up?
I guess the first thing would be, like, this is gonna sound crazy, but usually when a person dies, you kind of just mourn and grieve and cry and kick and yell, and then it's over. I think the unlearning for me was that that's what it had to be. Because once my aunt died, I was like, no, that cannot be the end. Like, that was too short of a life. Like, there's no way that I'm only 26 when she died. There's no way that I'm only 26, 25, and I'll probably outlive the number of years that I had with her. No. Like, to me, it was unacceptable. So I went on my own journey. I went on my own mission to figure out what is there? Is there an afterlife? Is there this? Is there that? Especially coming from where I come from, like, it just is what it is. Like, you just miss the person, and that's just what it is. There's nothing you can do to bring them back. There's no way to, like, get over this emptiness in your heart. It's just, death is death. Like, there's nothing. This last year has taught me a whole completely different outlook on life. And I will say my son helped me a lot with it, because when I first was exploring and wondering and asking questions and just trying to figure out, like, if there was another thing, he always validated it. Kids, they say angels speak to kids. So when I was in my own head, like, was that a sign, or is she here? Like, I feel like she is. My son would be like, oh yeah, like, I saw her on the couch. Oh my God. And I'm like, what?
Hey, don't play with me.
Yeah, like, I'm like, what? Actually, the very first time it happened, I was putting him to bed. I was finishing up a little altar I had in my room. I was putting up her pictures. And then for some reason, like, Spirit literally threw this in my head, and I picked up the picture. I asked him, I said, who is this? And then he just looked at me and he smiled. And I was like, do you know who this is? And he said, yeah. And I was like, but how? And then he didn't say nothing. And then I said, do you see her? And he said, yeah. And I said, but where? And he pointed towards his crib.
I literally have choked.
And I was like, but what do you, like, what does she do? I was like, you dream of her when you're sleeping at night, when it's like black inside of your minds, like you see her? And he said, no. And I was like, I was like, oh, she watches you? Like, she's standing over you? And he was like, no. So I'm like, what? I'm like, so how? So then in my mind, I go, does she sleep with you? Because at this time, he would sleep like all the way at the edge of his bed. So I'm like, why did he be sleeping, like holding his crib? So I was like, does she sleep with you? And he said, yeah. And he smiled. I said, do you know her name? And his one of his best friends' name is Adea. So he said, Adea. And I said, Adea. And I was like, I thought to myself, I said, no, it's not Adea. And then I said, Day, because one of the last voice notes or voice memos that she left me, she was like, hey, Reyna, it's Auntie Day. But I always called her Sunday because that was her name. So I go, Day? And he said, yeah. I said, Sunday? And he was like, yeah, that's her name. And I was like, no. So for the next month, I paid close attention, like, let me see if this is real. Every single night he hugged, like the whole, because my aunt was a big woman. Yeah. So she came as herself. Yeah. She would take up this whole thing and he'd be smack dab like against the wall of his crib.
Wow.
And would leave space every single night for like 5 months straight.
Oh my God.
So I was like, that can't be a coincidence. Mm-hmm. And then from there, it's just been validation after validation after validation. Like, he tells me what she's doing. He tells me what she sings. I'll play his playlist of songs that she listens to. He'll be like, oh, this is Auntie Sunday's song. And I'm like, how did you know that? It would be her favorite song.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking of people who are going through a tough time. Like we'll just use grief as an example. Mm-hmm. I really feel for people who are feeling that pain and don't know how to like ask themselves these questions, like when we're talking about learned behaviors and like just developing a new perspective to get them through that hard time. Mm-hmm. What advice would you have for people who maybe the world is so cloudy right now and whatever that they're going through? Like, what is it? Are you supposed to read books, listen to podcasts? Like, how do you kind of find within yourself that there has to be something more, you know?
Well, I think a lot of us subconsciously have something in the back of our minds that we've just been avoiding. So I think a lot of us would be like, I don't know, I just want to quit my job and I want to do this. And then just like, it's a dream from way in the back of our minds. Like, we don't even think about it anymore. Or we think like, I should call that one friend. But then the day goes by and you don't call that one friend from 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times, like, those be the things that God is trying to put in your mind so that you go there, so you figure out a reason why that message was in the back of your head. Mm-hmm. But also, you have to be very intuitive with it, because you can't just go by every single idea that pops up in your mind. Some are not for you. Mm-hmm. Some are really not for you, which is why sometimes, like, you have ideas and then randomly you'll see somebody else popped up with the same idea. That one, you didn't miss it, it just wasn't for you.
Mm-hmm. I think because we've been conditioned to think that your intelligence is your end all be all, we don't really tap into the physical and like your intuition. And so it's like, of course, it is going to be hard to trust yourself, to trust your intuition, and to really listen to like those voices or those signs, whatever you're seeing in the universe.
No, that's real. I will say though, like from a young, I had always been in the gifted programs. But I never worked hard. Like, throughout my life in school, I never worked hard. But I was always like, teachers loved me. I would come to school. I had the same backpack probably from 6th grade to 12th grade. No pencils. I'd be like, hey, give me a pencil. Like, my parents weren't going to Staples to buy me pencils. Like, that's just not the family I grew up in. So because I was that, when I went to college and I realized it was such a serious thing, I really had to go back and forth with myself and figure out, like, is this something that I can really trust to get me to where I need to go? I don't know anyone at that time. I had never met a person who graduated from college, but somehow they made a life for themselves. So as I was going to college, once my 2 years at community college was up, I was like, either I transfer from here and my destiny goes this way, or I just leave it all now. So before that last semester ended, I just dropped out. I was like, this ain't for me.
And was there any fear involved, or it was more like this just makes sense?
No, I don't. When it comes to a career, I don't really like. Neither of my parents went to college, so I didn't feel like it would never work out. Even if this is not what the result was, it would have been another result.
Sure.
I'm not lazy. That's the number one thing. I'm not lazy. So I wasn't going to allow myself to be looking for someone to provide for me. I wasn't going to allow myself to just give up or to go back to something that I knew wasn't for me. I was just like, yeah, okay, now it's time to figure it out. And because I had known in the back of my life, or in the back of my mind all this time, oh, people view you as gifted. People always listen when you speak. This, that, and another. I said, I got to make a life out of that. Whatever that charm is that people say I have, I got to make a life out of that. I know I'm attractive. Do I go around and be like, damn, I'm that? Like, no, like, that's corny to me. Because I'm not here focused on this. Right. Like, I've always, since young, like, I've always been on a whole different outlook. When people are like, even when I go out, which is why I stopped going out from a very young age. When I go out, I don't like to be looked at as like, damn, she's beautiful. Like, that's not something that I feel is, even though, yes, it's a compliment, it's not something that makes me feel good. I appreciate it. I'm not saying like, I'm like, ugh, like, that's not my personality, but it doesn't, when I put myself, because I know I volunteered to be here, when I put myself in that situation, I can't like be the dark cloud in the side of the building. Like, I'm gonna give that energy, but also I know when I get home, like, I wasn't even trying to be there like that, so I shouldn't have gone.
I love that we're talking about this, and this was one of the questions I had for you. I feel like you found your audience and your voice at a pretty early age. I found your work when I was like 20, 21, and it was a godsend. I swear I would be on the train, like, I specifically remember this, and I'll be like listening to music, going to some guy's house, and then like a message to women or what a relief, and I'm like, can you not like kill my mood right now? But it really came into my life at a time where I was like, I didn't have cousins or sisters or aunts or whatever friends telling me these things. These were completely new ideas about like being a woman and self-worth. I think if you're a young, beautiful, intelligent, eloquent, and confident woman, that's pretty hard to come by. And so in paving your way for your career, was that a lonely time? Like, did you feel misunderstood?
Yeah, I felt misunderstood, but I made a conscious decision. Before I was REYNA BIDDY, like, I was really just myself. So I had my Instagram, and it was a whole totally different name. And it was like, I was me. So it was like selfies, pictures of the plants I'm planting. Like, it was a lot of what today is, but it was just the old, like, whatever I was doing at 17, 18. Pictures of me and my homies, pictures of me at the beach, pictures of my new pedicure. Like, I was all that, right? And then I made a conscious decision to be like, okay, now you're an entity. Like, your book's not even out yet, but you have to hold yourself as such. So when I first started, like, when I first put my book out and stuff, I never really posted pictures of my face. At first, it was like, this is what I'm doing. So it's like poetry. If you go back, like, it's strictly poetry. It's not really pictures of me. And then as time went on, I would talk to my aunt on the phone for hours, and she would be like, girl, like, use that. Like, you are gorgeous. Like, use that. And I was like, I don't like taking pictures. I feel awkward. Like, still to this day, like, if I'm like this, I'm like, I feel awkward. So, but she was like, no, you have to use that. Like, that's your weapon. That's how you get people in. So when I started to use it, people of my age group started to come to me. Prior to, it was like, my audience was all over the place. My audience was like 50-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 13-year-olds, like kids who were in juvie, like, it was all over the place. And so as I've like grown and been on this journey now for like 8 years, I would say 7, 8 years, the conversation has changed with what I'm writing about. It's no longer just like, this is why you should break up with someone. Now it's like, this is why you should cry. Like, things are just different. I hold myself and I hold the work that I'm doing to be very like right now. Like I said, I'm very right now. So whatever I'm going through right now, that's what I'm going to write about. I can no longer talk about breakups because I've been in a relationship for 6 years. I can talk about that one breakup that still feels like I didn't get closure for, and I'm pissed about it. But I can't talk about like how heartbroken I am from that breakup, because I ain't been broken up in 7, 8 years.
Right.
So the conversation has changed, and I'm glad that it has, and that it's going to continue to change, because with where I'm going, I have to attract like-minded people, but also people who feel like you look like me. For me, that's a big thing. So yeah.
Why do you think it is hard for women to like appreciate their beauty and all of the like kind of, I hear a lot of people talking more about divine feminine energy and things like that. And so yeah, why is that so hard for us, do you think?
I can't speak for everyone. I can't speak for all women. If I'm speaking specifically for myself, I grew up with a very, very masculine father who was like, you're not walking outside the house with them shorts on. Put some pants on now. You're not walking outside. Like, I wasn't even allowed to get my nails done till I was like 17.
Yeah.
So I was raised in that, and it kind of became creature of habit. Like, it just became like, oh, I don't feel comfortable. Like, I don't feel comfortable when people look at my legs. Like, it wasn't an insecurity. It just really was like, I wish I didn't wear this.
Okay.
And that turned into like, I didn't grow up. As a kid, I wasn't like the girl everyone was going crazy over. I was just usually the homegirl, really. Like, I was really, honestly, so none of my homies were like trying to get on me like that. So as I turned into this girl, before I turned into REYNA BIDDY, I got my dose of it, and it was just uncomfortable for me. It was just like, damn, like I've never been through this before. I wasn't, and then also like even till this day, I'm very misaligned with my femininity. I should be, my whole chart is water. I should be way more feminine than I am. But I'm very misaligned because of the masculine background that I took on and that I was raised on. But also, my mom always had to be hard because she was always fighting with my dad. So she always had to hold her own. And she was always fighting with her mom. She was always like a lion. Till this day, I've probably seen her soft like 3 times, and it's every time my son is sick. Like, it's not like soft in love. It's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Feeling helpless, I guess you could say. And even if I feel helpless, I'm still guards up, walls up, like, nah, I'll figure it out. So I think that's what it is. Like, I just am not deeply rooted in my femininity. So it's really uncomfortable, and it's difficult for me to like sit in that like Marilyn Monroe, like this is who I am, that Amber Rose, like that energy of just like I'm here. It's uncomfortable for me. Yeah.
And so for people who read your books, I mean, we talked about it earlier, you have several albums on Spotify, you have several books, you're coming out with a new book next year, talking about perfectionism and just the creative process. Like, do you make yourself write every day? Can you just talk a little bit about the ugly parts that we don't see?
The ugly parts that you don't see, okay. If somebody calls me while I'm writing and they hit me with a problem, that's the ugly side. Because now you just brought me out of my zone and I gotta problem solve with you. That's the ugly, because I'll be in my zone writing something fire, and then now I'm not even in the space, so that poem never got finished. The ugly is feeling like you have a lot still left inside of you, but it's really difficult to let out because you don't know how to express it yet. What else is ugly? I don't really like to, just in general, even if it is a bad poem, I don't like to call it ugly, because the way that I write, especially nowadays, I'm going to be talking about something really honestly. So I don't like to look at it as ugly because I'm telling the truth. I just don't feel like it fits the outline of what I wanted for this specific project. So I'll just sit it to the side. But for the most part, whatever I'm writing, I'm putting in my books. Like, I don't have too many, unless they're completely unfinished, I don't have too many that I fully wrote and said, this just doesn't fit. There's maybe like 5 poems left off of each book.
Oh, wow.
At most, yeah. Most of the stuff I write, I'm putting in a book. And if I'm not putting it in a book, I'm putting it in an album. Yeah, because let's just say, for example, I have a book coming out next year. And it started off as me wanting to talk about love. And so I'm like talking about love, and then all kind of crazy shit goes on in my life. My aunt dies, like COVID hits, I'm in a pandemic. I started writing my last book in November of 2019. And then my aunt got sick in April of 2020. So from those points, there was a lot of rain. So I'm not writing anything pretty. Like I'm writing in a really dark place, even if it's about love. And then from the point my aunt got sick in April to the point she died in July, I had in the back of my mind her saying, celebrate your life. So I wasn't writing at all. I was living my life. Went to Hawaii, like I was moving. And then she died. And from there, like the floodgates came and the book was no longer about love. Like the book completely changed. So all that cute shit went out the window, never is being used, and will never see the light of day, basically.
Really? Because it's not what you feel you need to share, express anymore, or
it just, I would be doing the world a disservice by putting out something that you've already seen.
Okay.
Most poetry books, you can pick up about 2 of them and figure the next 10 are probably going to be about the same thing.
Right.
Until I get back to a place where I'm like, okay, like now I can talk about this and I'm in this blissful state. Maybe if I'm ever pregnant again, like, and I talk about mom shit, like if I ever get to those places, then I'll talk about it. But for right now, like I have to be as honest as I can be, and I'm in a great place, don't get me wrong, but I'm not in a place to talk about beautiful things. They are beautiful to me, but to most people it's like, damn, did you have to go, like I get DMs all the time where it's like, Reyna,
are you okay?
Are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. Like, I'm perfectly fine. Just because I talked about how sad I am that this, that, and the other, like, I'm not living in that space. I'm the type of person who can write about something maybe 20 times. And at that 20th time, I say, you're not writing about this anymore. So move on.
Okay.
And I move on.
How do you know when any piece of work is ready to be released? I think a lot of creatives can get caught up in, we call it perfectionism, but I think sometimes it's fear and we're holding ourselves back. So if we're looking for like those green lights, at least in your head, what does that look like when you're like, I'm not gonna hold myself back, it's time to release this?
Okay. So I come from, I wouldn't say the most musical background, but music was always just my safe haven as a child. My dad did music, my uncles did music, my aunt always had music on. When I was young, my mom went to Lauryn Hill concerts. Like, so music has always been a really big part of my life. Now, engaged to a producer, like, so music has always been that for me. When I was younger, I was obsessed with Lil Wayne. Like, that was like my dude, like all of his mixtapes, like he was my guy, right? And it opens me up into the world. I had already knew what rap was and stuff, but I had never like studied it. I had never really, geniused and learned every single lyric. So when I started to do that and I started to see the ways that he was putting words together, I was like, fam, like I was blown, because you can rap a song and not really pay attention to what he's saying lyrically, right? Or to what anyone's saying. And so that was the start of everything for me. Once I decided I was going to write a book, before I wanted to write books, I used to write music. So I told myself, okay, the music thing, whatever, I'm going to do this. I'm going to write books. So when I was trying to figure out how to outline, like I said, I wasn't a good a good student in school. When I was trying to figure out how to exactly write this book, I started writing it like an album. So I was like, the very first half of this is the intro. The middle has to be heavy. And then the ending has to wrap this shit up. So how are you going to wrap it up? Is it still going to be darkness, or are you going to bring it back to lightness? Or are you going to, is there a happy ending? Like, I started to look at it literally as like, this is my intro, this is my interlude, this is like, I pretty much write my books that way. So when I feel like when I go through and I reread the book 17 times, on that 17th time, I go, I don't have my single in here.
Oh, okay.
Like, I don't have that. So then I start writing, like, I need my singles. So I might write 6 singles. 2 of them will probably make it. And then usually those are the ones that I go, okay. When I say singles, I mean digestible to everyone.
Right.
People who are going to listen to it and they're not going to be like, what is she talking about? Those are like the cuts, the low cuts in the album.
The radio friendly.
Yeah, like, exactly.
Right.
And the other stuff, the heavy stuff, that's the thing that the real fans or the real people who want to read poetry, those are the ones that those are going to be like, oh, I appreciate that she put this in.
Search for better, and I know you deserve better. I know you deserve better than to have your spirit bruised. I know you deserve someone who empowers you. I know just how beautiful you could be if only you could see your own self-value, and I know you. You're a collection of paradoxes. You're a compilation of food for thought. You're a woman. Before all things, you're more a lover than a fighter after all, it seems. You're special. Listen to me. You are special. And I know you deserve way better than to settle.
If you listen to I Love the album, I started the recordings in my old apartment, and you can like hear the fire alarm.
Oh, the beeping.
Yeah,
okay,
the beeping.
Okay.
You can hear it. So like whatever has that in it, I started in my first apartment, or it wasn't my first apartment, but the place I lived in, grew up my whole life. And then I finished it in downtown when I lived in downtown. But the book itself, I wrote within like 2 months. Or no. Actually, I wrote that book in 3 weeks, but then I perfected it within 2 and 3 months. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I had heard I Love My Love before I ever read the book. And that was completely new to me. I'd never, it was such a blessing that I found that on Spotify. And it's funny how that's just even a testament that I don't think I would have ever found you, me personally, through Instagram. I wasn't really looking up poets. And it's just hard. If you're not tapped into certain conversations already, it's hard to seek that, because you really don't know, like, hey, I'm feeling this type of way, but I don't know that it's a root of a lack of self-esteem or self-worth, self-love. So hearing your work, reading your books was the first time I had someone in my life like really breaking down these concepts for me. Who was that person in your life, or like what was the inspiration behind being like, all right, I know I can write, I know what I'm gonna do with my life, and this is what I'm gonna, really talk about?
Honestly, at that time, I didn't really have people that were artists around me. I liked reading books. I started reading books like 6th grade, and throughout middle school and high school, that was my thing. I always read a book. And then when in 9th grade, my English teacher actually told me, she was like, you're going to write books one day, Miss Jackson. And I was like, I don't know, like maybe once I figure out my career and stuff. It was never really a thought to me until I was in college, after I had basically decided I didn't want to write music anymore or forever. And at the very end of my college career, I was like, I don't want to do this. I need to figure out something, and I need to figure it out fast. So I went to my dad and I told him, I was like, I think I'm just going to stop going to school for a while. He was like, why? You already took a year off. And I said, I think I'm going to write a book. And he was like, but you could do that while you're in school. And I was like, yeah, but it's just I'm not going to have enough time. So he went to work from 10 till 7 every day. My mom was at work from 6 till 4 every day. I just stopped going. I stopped going to school. I dropped out. And within that time, me and my now partner were getting closer. And I told him, I was like, what do you think about me dropping out? And he was like, I went to college for one day. And then at the time, actually, I also worked at Bloomies. So I was like, I think I'm gonna quit my job. He was like, I worked at the Gap for one day. Like, he was very much that person who was just like, whatever you want to do, do it. So it gave me the courage and the freedom to explore in my work environment and my creativity. I had never been creative. Before I wrote I Love My Love, the very first poem, which I don't remember what it was, probably was the intro. Before that, I had never wrote a poem in my life. I knew nothing about poetry. I didn't write poetry books. I watched Def Jam poetry, but it wasn't something that I aspired to be. I wasn't like, I'm going to be a spoken word poem. I just knew it connected to your soul differently. So as I was writing this frame of work, that's when I said, like, something jumped in my mind and was like, use your voice. And at the same time you're writing and you're like, how will this sound when people are reading it?
Right.
So that's when I started reading it, and I'm reading it, and then I start to really put myself in it. Like, I'm writing it and I'm reading it as if I want people to hear it. Then I said, well, people won't understand me if I don't read it myself, if I don't record it myself. So then that's when I decided to do that. But yeah, I knew nothing about poetry. I knew nothing about art. I knew nothing about creativity. I'd never had any of that in my life. All I had was music. My dad was at that time trying to do music. And I just went with it. I was like, I learned how to outline in 8th grade. Like, I'm going to put an outline together and I'll make a poem for each of this emotion.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you had your partner with you to kind of support you through the creative process. How important is it to have someone? Because I think ultimately it's you and your paintbrush, whatever that is. At the end of the day, it can be writing, music, film, whatever. It's ultimately you and your paintbrush at the end of the day, but it's always nice to have people who understand and support. So was it always like that? Did you ever go through times when you were, the vision was so clear in your head and you were maybe trying to explain it to people around you?
So my partner gave me the space to explore my creativity and gave me the space to believe that it was possible. But he wasn't necessarily like book savvy. He didn't really know much about poetry. When I first told him I wanted to do a book of poetry, and then I read it to him, he was like, when you said poetry, this is not what I expected to hear. And I get that often. People always say, like, you write poetry, but this is not what I was expecting. So he also, at the same time, gave me the encouragement to believe that I was good at it. Because when I first read it to him, I had read it to one other person, and that person wanted to shield me and wanted me to protect myself and to protect my family. So they were like, I think this is too much. And I was like, but why? Like, but that's how that person grew up and was raised and did their own art, right? So because he gave me such like this encouragement, like, no, do it for real. Do it this way. Do it the way you're doing it. I became like, I like basically blossomed and bloomed into this different being, but also watching that person go to work every single day, because obviously self-employed. Watching that person go to work every single day from 3 p.m. till 3 a.m., 3 p.m., 3 a.m., 3 p.m., 3 a.m., and then make time to work out, to cook, to this, to that. It gave me a different motivation. It was never that I necessarily looked to him for inspiration, but I was able, and still to this day, I'm able to get motivation because I'm like, yo, you accomplished all of this. I want to just get a taste of that. I want people to pick up my book once I'm gone. Like, I want to do that. So when I'm writing, I'm not thinking of it, but I'm being as honest as I can, so that just maybe one day I'm like 90 or one day I'm however old and I go, people have something to remember these stories by, and to learn from. Because it's not like I'm giving a history lesson. It's real life situations.
And even just touching on the fear that some people have to share their stories, I feel like there's just it's like, what's the point of us all being here if we're just gonna stay in our house and, you know, keep it looking pretty from the outside and not connect on like a really human level? Were you raised in that way? Was that something, when we were talking about unlearned behaviors, was that something you kind of had to be like, no, actually I want to do this different, like I do want to share my story? You know, was writing something that helped you develop that truth, or no?
Oh yeah, as I first started writing, like I said, when I first started writing I Love My Love, I was in my room in the dark, still on bunk beds at the time, and I was laying down and I started writing, and I was like, after I finished, I said to myself, yo, that was really heavy. Like, where did you even get that from? And it was just that little spark that made me feel something. When I reread it and it gave me chills, I was like, somebody's gonna get chills. Like, somebody has to. But still was like, I don't know, didn't know how to go about it, didn't know where to go, all of the things. So my parents definitely always told me, like, to be yourself, to be a follower. To not be a follower, to be a leader. That was like their number one thing. Like, you're a leader, don't be a follower. If your friends are doing something bad, my life, all the stories that I've gone through in my life have not even hit this. We're not even like close to it yet. Eventually I'll tell them. But at some point in my life when I was very young, I hung out with nothing but gangsters. Like, it was like me and just gangsters behind me, shootouts, everything. And I was just chilling like, what's up? All of those, even in those times when everyone was drinking, everyone was getting high, everyone had guns, like, I never in my mind was even like, I need one of those, or I need that, or I want to get drunk with them. I was sitting there, everyone was high and faded. I'm sitting there cooling, like, talking to them, having a normal conversation, and never once was influenced to be like, I want to do that too. And my parents definitely instilled that in me, because it was like, I'm watching them, they don't look dumb, they look like they're having fun, but I personally was not ready for it and I didn't want it. So throughout life, that's just how I move. Like, I'm like, I don't want that. Today, it's very, very common to feel like you can see somebody's life and you look at it and you go, I want that. I don't do that. I'm so within my own skin that I feel like everything I have is everything I need. And if I do want something, it's never that. It's never what you have. I want what I have. So even when people, I was going to mention this earlier, like when people ask me, who's your inspiration? When people DM me, Reyna, I've never heard anything like your stuff. Do you have anyone you listen to, or do you have anyone who's similar to you? I'm like, I don't even really respond to it, because I'm like, first of all, I kind of like, I'm not going to say I started this, because obviously there's Flowetry, there's big names behind this. But I will say, out of like my class of poets, I was the first one to like put my foot out there and be like, I'm stepping on this ledge. And so I had no one to look to. I had no one to like mimic. I had no one. Do I have people who I enjoy listening to? Yes. I love listening to Rudy Francisco. I love listening to Aja Monet. I love listening to Jasmine Mans. Like, I love listening to real poets. I love listening to Nina Simone talk. I love listening to Toni Morrison as she has conducts herself and has interviews. I love listening to Lucille Clifton talk and speak and hearing that grace in her voice. I love listening to Maya Angelou in her interviews. I love all of that. But I'm not giving what they're giving. I will step out and say, like, I'm not even half as intelligent in the same ways that they are. But I have my own intelligence. I have my own experiences. I have my own beliefs. So I'm not trying to be, I'm not inspired by what you're giving me, but I'm motivated. And I think that's the huge disconnect in this generation specifically. A lot of people are too busy being inspired and wanting to recreate something rather than being motivated to leave their own imprint behind, especially in the poetry industry. So when I read a lot of the poetry, like, I don't get excited, because I'm like, I feel like I've read that so many times. And not only that, but it just doesn't feel like you really like put a sweat in it. Like, it feels like you sat there and was like, someone's gonna like this. Like, I can't, that stuff I can't get with, especially the rewording of the same poem 50 times. I can't.
Does that get frustrating as a creator, like in social media in this digital age, just kind of like seeing your work probably being reproduced? Or
When I was younger, it was frustrating because, again, I hadn't been in the industry long. I hadn't been doing it for long. So within 1 year of like my book being this big thing, me starting to see that people were writing like me or were mimicking my style or trying or hopping on beats, at one point I was like, it pissed me off. Like, because I was like, what? Like, why are you doing this?
Because you were in your bunk bed when like
like it's just to, not only was I in my bunk bed, but I was like really in my head, like, how can I do it? For you to read something and then just switch the words or like switch a few lines and like call it your own, it's not cool to me. But now I'm like, I can recognize my work from somebody else from a mile away. I'm like, oh, that's RB. Like, oh, that's RB. That looks like RB. But at the same time, I don't hate. Like, I'm like, everybody got to eat. Back then, I was like, nah, shut down, block. Like, I'm not trying to deal with, I don't even want to see it. Now I'm just like, hey, everybody got to eat. You got more? Let me see. Maybe you can inspire me. Like, maybe you turned my style into something else. That's what I want to see, if anything. If you can say I'm your inspiration, you send me something and I get blown away, that's what I want. Because then I'm like, damn, you just inspired me to write about hopelessness, or you just inspired me to write about, I haven't touched on that feeling yet. So that's what I hope to see. I don't see it very often, but I don't blame anyone for it because everyone's finding their own voice. Like, I'm pretty sure there were a few poets that were mad at me when I first started. Damn, she sounds just like me, or she's doing, but as time has gone by, like, there's no one at this time, there's no one that I sound like. And I can say that confidently because it's the stuff that I'm writing that's making me sound the way I sound. It's not my voice physically. Like, it's not me saying words and being like, oh, she does. Maybe I sound like someone's voice. Like, maybe my tone is similar to somebody else's. But as far as what I'm writing, I'm not taking it from anybody else. I'm taking it from my own experience. So I can't sound like anyone.
What I love about your albums as well, and I think it was I Love My Love, is that you kept in, there were only like one takes, right? Like, you kept in any hiccups or time because it was like you could really feel the passion and the authenticity of that moment in time. Which
I still do that. I still like on Soy Luna, there was mess ups. On Sunday, there was mess ups. I try to keep that element in because I don't want people to expect perfectionism out of me because I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect and I struggle. I don't use my voice as much as I should. I don't memorize my poems. If you yourself have a message to woman and you memorize and you read it or say it back to me right now, I'd be like, damn, I said that? Like, I don't remember. Once I move on from the piece, I move on from the piece. The thing could be streamed millions of times, but I'm just like, I don't remember that, like, because I never replayed it. Once I got it out there, like, I never go back. So when I re-listened to some of the stuff, just recently, I was driving to the Vallarta, and I was going to go get some tortillas, and I was like, let me listen to I Love My Love for once. I listened to God knows which piece. I cannot remember, but I was like, yo, what the hell? I said this?
And you were so young.
21.
Yeah.
21, yep. And so to me, it's even shocking because those are the places that I go to when I'm working. A lot of the times, me and Sky talk about it all the time. When we re-listen to episodes, we be like, do you remember saying that? And she's like, no, I do not remember saying that, because you enter this state of like flow to where you're not even fully present. And it all comes out, whatever comes out is how you're really feeling. Sometimes our feelings are subconscious. They're not just sitting. They're not sitting in this space. So when you go back and you listen to them, you're like, damn, I didn't even know, like, I was really feeling like that. I didn't even know that had a weigh on me the way it did. Like, sometimes it just comes out. And that's what, every time I'm writing poetry, like, that's what happens to me. I go back and I'm like, yo, yeah, you did that.
And I think for people who are like, oh, I don't know what my passion is, I don't know what my purpose is in life, I feel like just allowing yourself that space to do whatever it is that gives you that inkling. And I feel like most artists, creatives, but it's not just, it can apply to anything. Like, when you feel that flow or that thing, and I love what you said even about like when you finished recording or writing and you can feel proud of yourself, like, there aren't many things in life that can give you that like almost little kid feeling.
Yes.
And so I think that like if you are someone who is trying to find, you know, your passion in that sense, that can be trying to like find those moments where you do feel that feeling like you're a little kid.
Yeah, but I also want to emphasize that passion and purpose are not the same thing.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people get very misconstrued with that. Like anytime I'm talking to somebody and they're like, my purpose is this, or just how you said, people who are trying to find their purpose. Most times your career is not your purpose. Like it's just your way of expression. Your career should be something that makes you happy. Not all of us are fortunate that way, but your purpose could literally just be to cook. But for whatever reason in your mind, you feel like you have to help the whole world. And like, that's just poetry. Whenever people talk to me about poetry and they like put it in like this nice gold medal and they're like, hey, here's your medal. And this is not my purpose. This is far from my purpose. I'm just doing it because it's an outlet. And I'm fortunate enough to let my outlet be one of my sources of income so that I can sustain my life, so that I can go off into the world and fulfill my purpose.
Would you say that like this form of expression is your passion and then your purpose is something, do you feel like you have identified your purpose? Is that something that's like ever evolving? Or?
One of the things that I was placed here to learn or unlearn, whatever, is I was basically supposed to let go of all materialistic things and the way that they have holds over me. So now I live like this lavish life. Like I live in this beautiful home. I have this dog who's healthy. I have this child who's healthy. I get to go on walks. I get to go on hikes whenever I feel like it. I get to purchase food. Like there's a lot of people who don't have those luxuries. And I have to learn that I have to learn and I have to understand, I have to remember that it's deeper than this. Like this is not something to brag about. This is not something to get caught up in. This is not something to like, I'm not supposed to be here to be the person who's like, oh, I can't use that restroom. Like I'm not here to be the person who's like, I need like all the fine thing. No, like that has nothing. I can't take any of that with me. The jewelry, the this, the that, like it's cool, but I'm just not that. When I talk to people about this stuff, like to see the things that people get really possessive and obsessive over, like I don't relate to it at all. It doesn't make sense to me. If anything, it actually makes me feel like it makes me look at people like, why?
Right.
Why do you want that? Why do you need that? Granted, some people need that to stay motivated. So I understand that. Some people feel like I need to have a goal. I have to have a numbers goal in order for me to continue making money, in order for me to keep feeling excited about making money. For me, that's not it. Just what I just told you about how I'll read something or about how I'll feel something, I'll feel chills, or people coming to me saying, you changed my life. That's the gratitude that I get from what I'm doing, but it doesn't necessarily make me, that part specifically doesn't make me feel fulfilled. It's more so just the fact that I was able to express myself and people were able to understand it. Other than the understanding part, I don't really care if it changed your life. Like that wasn't my goal. I'm not like, I'm going to write this and I'm going to change someone's life today. That's not that's not my intention behind it. I'm literally just expressing myself. So to feel like, yo, I went through that same exact thing, or like, yeah, like I didn't find out I had secret siblings until I was 22. Like when people relate to the story and they feel like you got it out for them, that makes you feel like, okay, I'm on the right track. And that's it. All the extra stuff is like, the tracks, the confirmation, the validation, all of that, it has led me to this space where I've been able to be even more free, because I don't have to continue to speak about that, because I've dibbled and dabbled in other conversations and people have seen me there too. So it really just, my whole thing is to emphasize my human experience, me, not everyone else's, but mine. And whoever picks it up and says, I've been through that, like, well, thank you for seeing me.